With Cristiano, like as I was watching his career, it seemed like he had the talent, but it took him a few years to build up the either the alter ego effect or the character or the, I don't know, something.
Yeah.
It wasn't like automated for him. There were many matches and many periods where he sucked and they
Yeah.
substituted him, but eventually he figured it out. And that's why I always respected him a lot more than I do someone like, say, Leo Messi, who is always praised for being the greatest, etc., etc. But he didn't seem to have had to work as hard as Cristiano at becoming what he became. Just going off of the work you've done with high performers, what would you say are the most common blocks or hurdles that they seem to struggle with? Besides, of course, not having that sort of natural ability to just visualize, which you train them for, but like what other things do they tend to struggle with?
On a podcast a couple of years ago, a friend of mine asked me, Todd, I actually know who some of your clientele is. And even though you're secretive about it, so I know that you talk to an athlete, at maybe the 9 o'clock hour, and then you're talking to a CEO or an entrepreneur at the 10 o'clock hour. And so how do you bounce between the two, and which one is easier to work with? So ignore the first question, the whole, which one is easier to work with? And I was like, oh, the athlete, so much easier to work with the athlete. And he's like, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that. And I said, yeah, because think about this. This is extremely relevant because it's one of the most viral clips that's been pulled out of a podcast. So I know it'll be relevant for your crowd. Is the athlete knows their field. Like the basketball player goes to the court and there's the chalk line that goes around it, right? There's the tape on the floor. You know where the baskets are, so you know what you're shooting at. You'll even know what role that you're playing out there. Are you a guard? Are you a forward? Are you a center? And each role has its own responsibilities. Okay. So there's so many things that are already decided for the athlete as they get onto the court. Now let's switch it to the people that are listening. You're told to go start a business, or you tell yourself to go start a business, and there is no field. It's just, there's 1,000+ different ways to go about doing this. So the hallmark of a high performer in the entrepreneurial space is they grab the pen and they design their field that they are custom built to go and win on. So Igor, I'm sure you see this where you see someone who wants to do something that you're doing, and you've built up some serious digital marketing chops over the years. Maybe you're really great at running ads as well. And so they're like, I'm going to do the ads just like Igor. I'm going to do content marketing, and I'm going to be a host on a podcast as well. And they don't ever sit back and say, but what are the skills and capabilities I have right now? And whichever one lends itself to you going and winning and getting traction, that's the one that you should start with. Even though I know that your vision is to be the digital or to run ads. That's a vision that you can move towards. Right now, if you've had an experience of doing content for another company, or if you're really good at doing sales, then that should be the first channel that you get traction with. So I would say that one of the biggest struggles that entrepreneurs have is they model businesses off of people who you don't actually know what their background was that helped them be successful to start.
That's a good point. I've seen that before. I've seen people do that many, many times before, where they try to model somebody at like the year 15 of their journey, and they're of a certain personality. They got a certain set of talents and personality traits that help them be effective at that. And then they try to do exactly that thing. And they really struggle because they're missing some prerequisite that needs to be there for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, so it comes back to the whole idea of know yourself. So in all the programming that we do, whether it's, someone coming to an event, or it's me working with someone privately, or it's inside of groups, or it's inside of any programming course that we do, is we really try to index people towards doing a diagnostic on themselves. So I am not a big believer in personality profiling. It's fraught with a lot of really bad science. Myers-Briggs being one of them. one of the most categorically panned personality testing methods that's out there. So sorry if you think that you're an ENFP or whatever, and you really cling to that identity. What have you just done? You've slapped a label on yourself, and you're going to play through that label. And what it'll do is it will 100% find a way to hold you back, because I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, and I have no idea what definitions you have around that. When the profiles, though, because we get people to fill out a bunch of different profiling type diagnostics. When you take a profile based on a specific role or identity that you have in your life, then it becomes a lot more useful. So for example, Igor, I know, or at least I hope, that you show up differently for your son and daughter as a dad than you do when you're, like you had mentioned before, when you do your sales calls.
Yeah. I actually show up differently for my son and differently for my daughter as opposed to my son.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were to take some sort of personality test, and I don't know if you've ever done this, where you're kind of taking one of these things and then you get
I've
to a
done
question.
one.
Like, well,
I've done the wealth dynamics by Roger
wealth
James
dynamics.
Yeah.
You know, one of the best ones that's actually out there is the Ocean, OCEAN. It's the one that's got the most probably data and, you know, sort of scientific study that's been done around it.
Yeah.
It's also highly useful. It's just practical. But anyways, I don't know if you've ever so you've taken them and you get to a question, you're like, I don't know, because when I'm at home, I'm kind of more like this, but when I'm in business, I'm like this. There goes why they become useless.
Yeah.
You can only get good information out of it if you show up and say, I'm going to take this test through the lens of me being the CEO of my business, or as a dad, because you'll get two very different results.
Yeah.
So anyway, we do a lot of this stuff internally so that we can help sort of reflect back to someone, hey, this is kind of like how you're made up. And then we take that and we start to build a business model or a business or a role around that. Or for my case with athletes, we help them to build an athlete archetype that's going to help them go and win on their field. That's custom to them. They're not just trying to fake model some hero that they have. It's actually rooted in their skill set, you know, capabilities, and experience.
You know, I always wonder that specific part because I'm a big Man United fan. So naturally, when I learned that you worked with Cristiano, that was a big deal for me. And so now we look at Man United today, as of the moment of this recording, and for the last 10 years, the team is just in shambles. And they're
struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been many coaches. They don't like the ownership. There's been a different CEO. And I've always wondered, like, these guys, the players specifically, and the coaches too, they know their craft. They do it every day. That's all they do. They all have their moments. You know, they can do some incredible stuff for the highlight reel, and yet they struggle. They get on the pitch and they struggle. And I always wonder that, like, how come somebody that skilled, that talented, because otherwise you're just not on the first 11, right? You're not on the pitch. How come it just doesn't click sometimes? And yet there are people who they're players who are consistently great, or consistently good, at least, no matter the team they play for. Say Zinedine Zidane, right? So the guy won everything before he was like 27.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, they're just consistently good. With Cristiano, like, as I was watching his career, it seemed like he had the talent, but it took him a few years to build up either the alter ego effect or the character or I don't know, something. It wasn't like automated for him. There were many matches and many periods where he sucked and they substituted him, but eventually he figured it out. And that's why I always respected him a lot more than I do someone like, say, Leo Messi, who is always praised for being the greatest, et cetera, but he didn't seem to have had to work as hard as Cristiano at becoming what he became. You know, but it's a whole different argument. My question, I guess.
So it's actually it's a really thoughtful question, because a lot of people wouldn't see it, and it kind of goes to show that whoever's listening to you and follows along with you, that you've got a good mentor, because you're seeing things a bit differently than other people are. So I'll tell you, you know, building up a big mental toughness company, you know, I get asked like, well, so what's your definition of mental toughness? And I'll say mental toughness is your ability to be flexible and adaptable despite what you're getting as circumstances. That's true mental toughness, which sort of breaks the frame for some people around, you know, mental toughness. Oh, that's the square jaw of Jocko Willink, right? Like, no, it's actually flexibility and adaptability. So now let's pull it back to your question of the athlete who can be a superstar over here, but couldn't be a superstar over here.
Yeah.
And that's because they have a hard time shape shifting. They have a hard, like they have just one mode, which is, you know, a lot of superstars have the mode of they really play through a super ego. And then when they come over to this one, which might be a team that has a certain system that they run, they're not able to kind of morph into that system very well. So that's the one thing with Messi, and I've never worked with Messi, but from observing and being around, you know, like club locker rooms and talking to other coaches and stuff, my observation of Messi is that he's very good at shape shifting, morphing himself into, which is really what flow state is. You know, it's the great Bruce Lee, you know, be like water.
Water, yeah.
You know, you always take the form and the shape. That water will always do that. Well, superstars know how to do that. And I would say with Zinedine, he was really great at that. And I got to know him a little bit with Real Madrid because he was inside their organization. He was very good at shape shifting, I would say. And then Cristiano, and again, he learned it before I ever started working with him. So I wouldn't take any credit for that. I think he matured and learned that idea of morphing into system versus when do I need to just power through it and be the superstar, you know, and take over a game, because that's one thing that superstars can do is I call it the ground punch moment, like where they, you know, the Incredible Hulk throws his fist in the ground and he's like, no more, or Wonder Woman smashes her two bracelets together. And it's the, you know, all right, boys, you know, here it comes. So, but it's that the kind of the root of that is flexibility and adaptability. And so I would just say to anyone that is building their business right now and you feel like you've hit a plateau or you got a ceiling above you, is it that you've got an idea of how you're going to achieve success and you keep on hammering away with this one idea? I would say maybe you chose the wrong strategy. Pick up a new strategy. That's flexibility and adaptability. It's the moving around it. You know, like if you're up against a wall, stop beating your hands against a wall, find another way. So be flexible and adaptable. And then I would just say a very useful question I would give people, because we do this, is use the power of your non-conscious. Your mind takes in so much information at the unconscious or subconscious level. So, you know, we've heard a lot about journaling in the past or whatever, but use the power of questioning to mine your mind while you sleep. So if you are up against something right now, listener, and it's not really feeling like it's working for you, before you go to bed tonight, pull out a piece of paper, a Post-it note or a journal or whatever you have, and ask yourself the question with trust and faith, is there a smarter way to go about hitting this goal? Question mark. Is there a smarter and more fun way of going about hitting this goal? And what happens is maybe the next morning you don't have this flash of inspiration, but sometimes it happens in the middle of the night where you wake up and you're like, I've got this. Why didn't I see this? Maybe it takes a couple of days. But the point is have faith and trust that your unconscious knows how to filter, you know, the ideas. Just most people aren't using their brain power as well as they could.
Wow, that's amazing. I really enjoyed this conversation. Guys listening, look, just go get The Alter Ego Effect. It's a really good read, and it can put you on a different trajectory, completely different trajectory than you are now. Todd, thank you so much for spending this time with us, and you know, your wisdom is priceless. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me.